She sat down, crying and in pain, remembering Agatha's threat. She begged passerby for help, but no one could assist her. As it became dark, Uloma grew afraid and confused, knowing she couldn't go back home to her father and her stepmother without the money. In a small village called Obodocha, nestled in the eastern part of Nigeria, lived a beautiful 8-year-old girl named Uloma. She lived with her father, Mr. Anayo, and her stepmother, Agatha. Since Uloma was 4, she had been doing all the chores in the house, from cleaning to washing and even cooking. Despite her intelligence, Agatha, her stepmother, was wicked. She stopped Uloma from going to school and made her hawk fruits in the village and neighboring areas. Mr. Anayo could provide for them, but he did nothing to stop Agatha's maltreatment of Uloma. Uloma often went to bed hungry because Agatha refused to give her food. One day, Uloma came back with incomplete money because some men took her fruits without paying. Agatha flogged her mercilessly and starved her for 2 whole days. Uloma missed her real mother and wished she was still alive. One day, as Uloma was about to go hawking in a neighboring village called Ikpa, heavy cloud gathered, indicating rain. She pleaded with Agatha not to go, but Agatha insisted. When Uloma arrived in Ikpa, it started to rain heavily. A strong wave drew her into the flood, carrying her tray of fruits away. Uloma cried and chased after the fruits, forgetting about the flood in front of her. Just as she was about to be swept away, a beautiful mad woman appeared and pulled her out of the flood. Uloma was surprised but grateful. However, when she returned home without her fruits, Agatha got furious and chased her away, demanding she return with the money or never come back. Uloma was heartbroken but determined to find a way to raise the money. Uloma went back to Ipa to find the money, but she couldn't get it. She sat down, crying and in pain, remembering Agatha's threat. She begged passerby for help, but no one could assist her. As it became dark, Uloma grew afraid and confused, knowing she couldn't go back home to her father and her stepmother without the money. Two boys approached her and asked her why she was alone. Uloma explained her situation and they offered to help. She felt happy and followed them. But as they walked, she became nervous and started shouting for help. The boys chased her, but just as they were about to grab her, Agodi, the beautiful mad woman, appeared and scared the boys away. Uloma recognized Agodi as the woman who had saved her from the flood. She followed Agodi, but Agodi kept chasing her away. Uloma persisted, and eventually Agodi stopped chasing her. They went to an uncompleted building where they stayed together. Uloma began doing odd jobs in the village market, earning money to buy food for herself and Agodi. Agodi grew fond of Uloma and respected her. Uloma decided to stay with Agodi and not go back to Obodocha ever again. Uloma and Agodi lived happily together. Uloma made sure Agodi wore neat clothes and took a bath twice a day. Agodi's appearance improved and people stopped calling her a mad woman. She became so beautiful that men started noticing her, but they were afraid to approach her. Instead, they gifted and bought things for her, making Oloma's days easier and stress-free. However, when they got too close, Agodi would become aggressive because of her mental instability. One day, a group of medical practitioners came to Ikpa village as an NGO to offer free treatment to the villagers. Dr. Ben, one of the doctors, decided to take a walk round the village. As he walked, he saw Agodi and her beauty captivated him. He fell in love with her and approached her to express his feelings. However, Agodi became aggressive and he quickly moved away. Uloma appeared and calmed Agodi down, asking Dr. Ben to leave. Dr. Ben couldn't stop thinking about Agodi and eagerly waited to see her again. When he saw Uloma, he asked about her mother, Agodi. Uloma explained that Agodi was not her mother, but someone sent by God to help her. She told Dr. Ben the whole story and he was moved by her words. Dr. Ben offered to help Agodi and visited them regularly to check on her. He bought medicine and food and Agodi's condition improved. Dr. Ben and Uloma became good friends and he became like a father to her. Because of Agodi's constant mood swings, Dr. Ben decided to conduct a test on Agodi. Though he had his suspicion, but wanted to confirm first. But the problem was how to convince Agodi to follow him to the hospital to carry out the test. A thought came through his mind. Uloma was the only one that can convince Agodi to follow him. Dr. Ben decided to meet with Uloma, so he sent a message to Uloma to meet him whenever she is free. Uloma received the message and came immediately but was told that Dr. Ben was not on seat, but she decided to wait for him till he came back. When Dr. Ben saw Uloma from afar and noticed that she was tired and sleepy, when he came closer to Uloma, he touched her and she stood up in shock and later recognized that it was Dr. Ben. She greeted, "Good evening, Dr. Ben. I have been waiting." Doctor smiled and said, "Yes, I know. I want to discuss Agodi's condition with you. I have decided to take up the responsibility of her treatment, but my problem now is how to convince her to follow me to the hospital." Uloma, hearing this, was excited and she told Dr. Ben not to worry, that she will convince Agodi to go for the test, that she has been praying to God for this miracle and God has answered her prayers. "Thank you, Dr. Ben. My God will continue to bless you forever. Amen." "Let me get going, sir. See you soon." When Uloma got home, she was able to convince Agodi. Both of them went to meet with Dr. Ben and the test was done. Few days later, the results of the test came out and it was discovered that Agodi had bipolar disorder. Dr. Ben started her medication immediately. Few months later, Agodi became better and regained her memories and started asking questions like, "Who are you?" and "Where I am." Uloma was happy for the recovery but also sad that Agodi does not recognize her. But Dr. Ben had to explain everything to Agodi, how Uloma stood by her. When Agodi heard this, she hugged Uloma and thanked her and promised to love her. Uloma became happy again. Dr. Ben promised to help Agodi reunite with her family. After few weeks, Dr. Ben asked Agodi where her village is. She responded, "Obodocha." The three of them set out to Obodocha village. When they got to the village, Agodi went to her husband's house. But this surprised Uloma because that same house is her father's house. But she kept quiet, trying to understand what was really going on. Agodi knocked on the door. Immediately, the door opened. A woman came out, followed by Anayo. When Agodi saw her husband, Anayo, she asked him who she was, and he answered, "My wife." Agodi wept and said to Anayo, "Now I know you never loved me. You couldn't even help look for me all this while. Instead, you married a new wife. Where is my child? I remembered I delivered a baby. Where is my baby?" Agodi shouted. Uloma stood frozen, trying to make sense of what was happening. Her stepmother Agatha immediately saw Uloma and she shouted at her, calling her thief, and asked about her money. Dr. Ben, hearing this, called Agatha a wicked woman. Instead of being grateful that nothing happened to Uloma, Agodi kept shouting, "Where is my baby?" And immediately Anaya said, "She is your child." Agodi turned, Uloma turned, and they both looked at each other with tears streaming from their faces. They hugged each other. Dr. Ben couldn't hold his emotion anymore. He also went to hug Agodi and Uloma. Later on, Agodi left with her daughter Uloma and Dr. Ben. She told Anayo that she was going with her child and he shouldn't bother looking for them. They moved in with Dr. Ben into a cozy apartment and Dr. Ben provided everything they needed. Uloma went back to school with the help of Dr. Ben and Agodi decided to learn a skill. One day, Dr. Ben finally proposed to Agodi in the presence of Uloma. Uloma was overjoyed and asked her mother to accept the proposal. With tears in her eyes, she said, "You are a really nice person, Ben. Even in my mental state, you were there, so why won't I marry you? Yes, I will marry you, my Ben." She stretches her fingers and Dr. Ben slipped the ring into her finger and they hugged each other tightly. Uloma joined them in the hug too, and soon their story came to an end and they lived happily ever after.